Ever driven down a perfectly smooth road and wondered how they get it so level? Or maybe watched a construction site take shape. Like, how do they even begin to get that ground ready for building? Well, today we're taking a deep dive into the world of grader operators, the folks behind those feats. And we've got some really interesting insights from RoleCatcher's career guide to help us along the way.
Yeah. It's easy to just drive by a road construction site and not really think about what goes into it. But these grader operators, they're the unsung heroes of, well, level ground everywhere, really. And the precision they have with those massive machines, it's incredible.
It's almost artistic. When you say, RoleCatcher uses this great phrase, slicing off topsoil with massive blades. And it really just captures that feeling of like, wow, this is more than just pushing dirt around.
Oh, absolutely. It's definitely an art form because you have to have such a deep understanding of the terrain, the blueprints, what the project is even for. A skilled grader operator can take a rough, uneven piece of land and turn it into a perfectly smooth and stable base for, well, could be a road or a building, even an airport runway. They do it all.
Yeah. It's like they're sculpting the landscape, and their machine is like
Mm.
this, like an extension of their vision for what it needs to be. Speaking of landscapes, RoleCatcher talks about the wide range of places these operators find themselves working in. Obviously, construction sites come to mind, but it goes way beyond that, right?
Oh, yeah, way beyond. We're talking mining operations, huge infrastructure projects.
Wow.
And this is where things get really cool. Remember when we talked about GPS and how it's changing farming?
Yeah.
Well, grader operators are using similar tech, and it helps them hit these crazy levels of accuracy, especially for tricky projects, like if you're cutting a road through a mountain or doing some kind of large-scale land reclamation.
That makes a lot of sense because you do kind of picture a grader operator as someone with years of experience relying on like instinct and feel.
Yeah.
But technology is changing the game.
Yeah. It's not just muscle memory anymore. It's about mastering these really complex systems.
Right.
And that's actually something that RoleCatcher really emphasizes in this guide. The need for greater operators to always be learning. This industry's constantly changing, so to stay on top of their game, operators need to be adaptable and always ready to learn new skills.
It's like they've traded in their old toolbox for like a high-tech control panel.
Right.
But it doesn't mean they're not still, out there
Yeah.
getting their hands dirty.
Yeah.
So for someone who's thinking about, hey, this sounds kind of cool, what are we really talking about as far as the day-to-day reality of being a grader operator?
Well, RoleCatcher does a good job, I think, of laying out both the rewards and the challenges. Obviously, there's that satisfaction of being able to step back at the end of the day and go, I did that. Like, I made that. I helped build that. You're literally, like we said, shaping the world around you. And you're often working outdoors. And like we've talked about before, the pay is generally pretty good, especially as you build experience and get those certifications.
And speaking of building, one thing that RoleCatcher highlights that I thought was really interesting was just how much of a career path this can be. Because they lay out these four distinct stages.
Right.
You start as entry level, and you go all the way up to senior grader operator. It's not just like you're always in the same position. You can actually move up and increase your earning potential along the way.
It is, yeah. And they have these example profile things where they actually have greater operators at different levels talking about what their day-to-day looks like. And I thought it was cool because, like, one junior operator was talking about the thrill of operating independently for the first time. And then you have a senior operator talking about overseeing, like, a whole team of people on this massive highway project. So you really get a sense for the way your career can grow.
Yeah, it's good. So we've got the what, right? We're
Right.
talking about shaping the earth with these massive, cool machines. We've got the why. We've got, okay, good pay, job security, a chance to build a real career. But what about the how? Like, how does somebody even get started on this path?
So RoleCatcher breaks it down into two main avenues: apprenticeships and on-the-job training.
Okay.
The apprenticeships usually involve some classroom learning, some hands-on, actually getting in the seat, learning on the equipment. And that's offered through, like a union or a trade school. On-the-job training is more learn as you go. So you're starting with smaller tasks and kind of working your way up under, the wing of someone more experienced.
It feels like a very real world kind of field, right? Like you can't learn everything from a textbook. You need to actually be out there,
Oh, absolutely.
feeling the equipment, understanding the soil.
Yeah, and that's where certifications come in. They mention NCCER certification. That's a big one in the industry. And that just shows employers, look, I've reached this level of knowledge and skill, and it can really make a difference. They even highlighted this one operator who said getting their NCCER certification was the thing that got them their promotion and a big pay raise. So it does have an impact.
That's huge. That's huge. So, investing in yourself and continuing to learn, it pays off.
Yeah.
And we talked about, physically being out there, running these big machines. But what about the mental game of being a grader operator? Like, what kind of mindset do you need to have to be successful at this?
Well, RoleCatcher really highlighted a couple of things. You've got to be precise, a good problem solver, and have a really strong focus on safety because, you are dealing with powerful equipment, often in challenging conditions.
Right.
So attention to detail is important. Being able to think on your feet if something unexpected happens. And of course, making sure that you and everyone around you is safe. Those are non-negotiables.
Yeah. It's a career that definitely demands like mental and physical toughness, I think.
Yeah.
Because you're not just like, it's not like a video game, right? You're out there. You're analyzing the situation.
Right.
You've got to think ahead, and you've got to be able to make these decisions on the fly in a way that keeps everybody safe and make sure the job gets done right.
And something else they touch on, too, is teamwork and communication. I mean, sometimes, yeah, you're out there on your own a little bit, but a lot of times you're part of a bigger crew. So you have to be able to communicate what you're doing, what you need from the other team members, work together smoothly. That's really important.
It's interesting. If you think about operating these big machines, and it seems very solitary, but you're right. You've got the surveyors, you've got the engineers, there are all these other people.
Oh, yeah. It's a team effort for sure.
It's really a team effort. And it makes me think about how RoleCatcher talked about how these skills show up in their AI resume analysis. Like that's something they actually look for even when they're, using AI to match people with jobs.
It's fascinating how tech is being used, not just to actually operate the equipment, but even to connect the right people with the right jobs.
Exactly.
Which actually, speaking of the right people and the right jobs, I think it's probably time to dig into what RoleCatcher had to say about interview prep, because they had some really interesting tips for acing those grader operator interviews.
Because you're right, when it comes down to it, that interview can make or break you.
Oh, absolutely.
And it feels like RoleCatcher gets that because they really seem to focus on giving you the tools to really nail it.
Yeah, and one thing that stood out to me was that they really emphasize, tailoring your approach based on the specific employer, the specific project.
Oh, for sure, because it's not, you can't just have this like, here's my generic grader operator spiel. Like, that's not going to work.
No, not at all. And that's where I think their AI tools come in really handy because they can analyze job descriptions, figure out exactly what keywords, what skills that employer is looking for, so you can then put those in your resume or cover letter.
It's like having a cheat sheet almost for the job search process.
Right.
Like, what are they really looking for here?
Exactly. You want to speak their language because it shows you understand their needs. And then, of course, that all carries over to how you're presenting yourself in the interview.
Right.
And RoleCatcher has a ton of example interview questions specifically for grader operators.
Okay, so, listener, like, put yourself in those shoes for a second.
Yeah.
You're sitting across from these interviewers. They've got this big project coming up. They want to know if you're the one to handle it. What are they going to ask you?
Well, I think based on what RoleCatcher's seeing, you can definitely expect to get questions about your experience.
Of course.
So, what types of graders have you operated? What kinds of projects? Have you run into any tough situations? But they're not just looking for you to, recite your resume.
Right.
They want to hear you talk about it. Show your passion, your expertise.
Yeah, like instead of saying, I've operated a bunch of different graders, you might say something like, I'm most experienced with motor graders, and I've used them on a lot of projects that required really fine grading, which, sounds similar to what you're doing here.
Exactly. Make that connection for them. Show them you've done your homework, that this isn't just, any other job application to you.
Yeah.
You're interested in them specifically.
And then there are those behavioral questions. Everyone loves those.
Oh, yeah.
The ones that are really trying to get at, like, how do you problem solve? What do you, under pressure? How important is safety to you? And RoleCatcher stresses this a lot. Employers want to know that you can think on your feet and handle those curveballs.
Right, and they have a really great example question. Tell me about a time you ran into an unexpected problem on a grading project.
Yeah.
How did you figure out what was going on, and what did you do to fix it?
That's smart. That's really smart because that's where having those, stories prepped,
Yes.
Thinking back on your experience and saying, okay, this is where I really demonstrated that problem solving, or this is where I showed that I could be a team player or adapt.
And then I put safety first.
Yes,
And
exactly.
it's not about bragging, but just showing how you've learned from those experiences.
Right, right. It's all a learning experience. So we've really gone deep into the world of the grader operator today. We've talked about the precision of what they do, these powerful machines that they get to run this like ever-changing world of technology. And we've uncovered some really great insights from RoleCatcher on, like how do you actually break into this field? And then, how do you knock that interview out of the park?
Yeah, and I think it's really cool that we've seen how this career path lets you build things, shape things, like you're leaving your mark on the world. And sure, it takes skill, it takes dedication. You got to be a lifelong learner if you're going to do this. But the rewards are there. The pay is good, but also just that feeling of accomplishment.
Yeah, I love that they highlight that because it is one of those jobs I think a lot of people don't even think about,
Right.
but it's so essential.
And you think about how technology is always changing. Who knows what's next for these greater operators of the future?
Oh, yeah.
It's an exciting time to be in this field, that's for sure.
It really is. So for anyone out there who's ever, gotten a thrill out of watching a construction project or wondered how in the world did they build that road,
Yeah.
hopefully this deep dive has shown you just what goes on behind the scenes, shown you the people and the skills that make those incredible things happen.
Absolutely. And hopefully this has sparked some ideas and given you the information you need to make some decisions about your future.
Exactly. And don't forget, RoleCatcher is an amazing resource, so definitely check them out if you want to keep learning more. Until next time, stay curious, aim high, and never stop learning.